Welcome to Trustworthy AI. This is a podcast on how we are looking in a dynamic AI risk and a challenges environment to de risk the business adoption of AI. We're talking about a very difficult and a very necessary component today in this landscape of adopting AI, and namely on trust management and how it affects humans and the human adoption. So we're looking at a couple of quite complex areas, but as I mentioned, really important to address them as we are adopting and getting the utilization that we want to get out of AI. Very happy to talk with Anand Rao. He is a distinguished services professor of applied data science at CMU and also at the Heinz College of Information Systems. He brings a very academic, but also a very practitioner's, as in a business perspective, in executing strategy as well as creating strategic approach to AI. Anand Rao has focused on research, innovation, applications, business and societal application of data as well as analytics, and of course AI over his 35 years in consulting, industry, and academic career. Very happy to have you here, Dr. Rao. And did I miss anything out?
No, thanks for that introduction and great to be here with
Yes,
you,
thank
Pamela.
you. So, as you know, I've been focused on trustworthy AI for quite some time now, over 5 years. And this is not an easy topic for the, in a, how do you take something like trust and equate it to business outcomes or business perspectives? So I'm really excited to talk to you about handling, some of these areas of what the areas are, what the risks are, what the challenges are, and how do we address it. So let's start out with what is trust management in your perspective?
Mhm. Yeah. I know that's not a very common word. I think if you Google trust management, you essentially get financial trust and how do you manage trust from the financial sense, nothing to do with AI. So I wanted to say that's something that I've been noodling on as a term. The reason is, as you just said, you've been involved in trustworthy AI. Uh, and the community itself over the past 10 years and more, but really in the past 10 years has been very focused on ethics of AI and how do we build AI that has embedded within it all the right values. Again, it's a very highly loaded term, the ethics and the values. Now, that's how EU and a number of other organizations also talk about trustworthy AI. Now, I think building things in a trustworthy sense does make sense, right? So I think everyone should be building things so that some of the ethical values are embedded in the AI. But that alone is not sufficient. Just because someone has built it, quote unquote, the right, trustworthy way, doesn't mean that the human being necessarily will trust an AI. And what I wanted to focus on was trust is not something that can be declared by the provider, the deployer, or the developer. The trust has to be earned. So the AI needs to earn the trust from the human being that is actually going to be using that AI. Again, I'm using both the augmentation of decision making that AI helps in, and also the automation, right? So, and the trust notion becomes even more critical when someone is replacing my job, if you like, right? So parts of my job or my full job. So in that sense, to me, trust management is an active way of managing that trust between the human and the AI. So how do we make sure that the human, when they are using the AI, can develop that trust? And at the same time, what can the AI do so that the human can start trusting it? It goes across a number of different dimensions that need to be there. for that to happen, the trust between the human and the AI to happen. And it also happens over time, right? So we can't mandate trust. Trust has to be earned, right? So I'm interested very much in that process. So as you said, change management, this is a very critical aspects of AI change management. People talk about change management in all kinds of large scale transformations, but here AI is being embedded within the workflow, within what people are doing. And I think more importantly, AI is touching at the heart of what it means to be a human, at least in the working world, right? So the dignity of human labor, I think, is one of the key aspects. And some of the backlash that you are seeing is not so much that some tasks are being automated, it's more you're attacking at the core of the purpose of human beings, and that is work and the identity they derive from work. So that's why I think this notion of trust and people trusting the AI has to be handled very delicately and handled over a period of time, right? So there's various aspects to it, but that's the area that I'm interested in more from a practical side. How do we make sure the AI is interacting with the human so as to engender trust and it is earning the trust of the people?
Yes, thank you. So it does highlight a very important point, right? Which is how to make this actionable, right? When we talk about change management or we talk about culture, that culture starts at the top, management lays out what is the culture when it comes to AI, and it's really important to drive that adoption and create that culture within the organization beyond going into what are the immediate returns that we want to get from here, right, from the technology, but really focusing also on that softer element, which is going to really make it or break it in my view, because unless the organization, namely the employees, um, are comfortable,
Mm.
right? And to your point, both
Yeah.
ways. How do you address that? And it's really important. It's more than just saying the messaging comes from the top. It's messaging comes from the top, and how
Yeah.
to manage that trust management, and what is that? Right. Very, very,
That's right.
very interesting. Your views on that. Um,
So let's take it, I mean, just as you said, to make it more practical, right? So, where and how this comes in. Um, just the way I typically tend to think about it is sort of in concrete terms, look at it as a life cycle process. So, how do we actually develop AI systems and the life cycle of it? Now, the first part of it is what we call as the scoping, trying to find out what is it that people are doing, what is it that AI can potentially do, and what problem is it really solving, right? So in conjunction with the people, or in some cases replacing some of the tasks that people are doing. So that's what I call as the scoping phase. Then of course you build the AI, then you deploy the AI, and then you monitor the AI, the end to end, right? So now just making trust management cuts across all of these. So just as you said, so there's a human trust and there's a AI human trust, and so on. So the first aspect of it is I think we need to be clear for the trust to develop with the people and for the people to develop on the AI. We need to be clear as a senior management, what are we using the AI for? And AI typically gets sort of two levels, right? So either use it to get better efficiency or use it to get better effectiveness, right? So either automate the tasks or essentially augment decision making by the people. Either of those, I think you need to be very clear with the people as what is it that you're trying to do. If you're trying to replace someone's task, then are you actually replacing just tasks? Are you really replacing jobs? Are you going to have the same number of people, have them do more work because AI is doing some of that work? Or are you actually going to get rid of some of the people? And if you're getting rid of the people, what are you going to do with them, right? So are you going to upskill them, or are you going to take them out of the company, get the cost changes, cost difference, and then give it back to the shareholders or reinvest, right? So you need to be clear on what is it that you're doing. Or if you're augmenting decision making, being very clear as to how do humans perform, And that is a baseline, and most organizations don't have the human baseline performance to even compare what the AI is adding. AI might be better, but AI could also be worse. If we don't know the human performance, how are we going to determine that the AI is actually performing worse than the human? Right. So in some cases it may be, right. So, and it will be in many cases where there's sort of high value involved, it might be performing worse than what the AI, what the human is doing. So, in that sense, you need to be very upfront about the different issues and then manage it proactively. So, I'm talking about managing. And the same thing goes when you're deploying the model at the other end of it. You've built it, you're deploying the model, then you need to earn the trust of the human beings. I'll give you a simple example to really make it very practical. This way back in the 90s, we were building AI systems for air traffic controllers. Highly stressful situation when a storm comes in, they have to rearrange the runways, and then typically the way the air traffic controllers do it is they'll hold the aircraft at 100 nautical miles. They'll make sure that all the other aircrafts within the 100-mile are landing, and then they'll release people off the hold. Right, so I'm sure we all have been in holding patterns just around the airports. Now, we built an AI system which was definitely, provably, I would say, more optimal, where we could get the aircraft to reduce the speed and we could essentially calculate the speed from all directions and then have aircrafts land without really getting them into holding patterns. It saves fuel, it saves time, right? So, definitely more optimal. Now, it's a highly stressful situation, and we knew that going in, people will be very hesitant to use a more optimal solution because that really involves a complete break from what the people were doing. So what we did at that point, so this is what I mean by trust management, we said, we'll have both solutions. So we'll have the solution that people always take, which is the heuristic solution, hold the aircraft at 100 nautical miles and then let them land the aircraft as they do. There's nothing optimal about it, but it's just a front end system, as well as give them the optimal solution. Sure enough, no one really went with the optimal solution. They were just going with their heuristic notion of holding the aircraft and doing it. But what we then did was to say, as soon as an aircraft landed in their traditional method, we would say, hey, by the way, if you have used our optimal solution, you could have saved X gallons of fuel, and the aircraft could have landed 3 minutes early, 5 minutes early, right? So we kept reinforcing that and gave them a chance to maybe have all of the different aircraft in all except for one direction where the aircrafts were landing. So it's slowly gaining the trust. So first giving them the metrics of what an optimal solution looks like, and then giving them a partial solution to the optimal solution. And then slowly they were able to get to, now I feel reasonably comfortable that I can do it without really holding the aircraft, right? So this takes time. Now, if I'm a pure number cruncher, I would say, why did you go through all the problem? You knew that it was optimal solution from day one. You should just mandate everyone to use the optimal solution
Mhm.
and be done with it. But yes, you could have done that, and the air traffic controllers might be very uncomfortable. Maybe there will be some incident, and they'll use that incident to basically kill the AI. Now, gaining the trust over a period of time just made it much more palatable to them, and also they got the confidence that they were then able to use it. So that's what I mean by trust management. It takes time, it is a very deliberate action, and you really need to the AI needs to earn the trust by giving enough but not too much new things, right? So if it's a total paradigm shift to the way the humans are working, especially when you're augmenting their decision making, they're not going to use it, right? So you're suggesting something totally different. Even if you can explain, again, the explanation may not be understandable. Like it could have gone into all mathematical proofs to show how mine was optimal, but people don't care about that, right? So at some level. So that's what we mean by saying trust management is something that we need to handle, where you really need to think about what the AI is doing, what the human is doing, and how do you create that interface and have the AI build that trust over a period of time.
Yes, thank you. That's really good to get that example, right, of how those who are experts in their area feel, can we trust these AI systems to produce equivalent or better results, right? Try, show us
That's right.
and verify that this is possible. Now, I do want to talk about a slight nuance there, which is
Mhm,
in, just so if somebody's listening and wants to think that, is thinking along the lines of where replacement can happen, right? Job displacement can happen, or replacement, where, these systems can actually be better, right? And we can now replace
mhm,
the humans. I just want to point out one thing, and please tell me if I'm wrong, that yes,
mhm,
to a certain extent, there will be reliability. They may be performing better in this scenario, for example, just taking that. But there could be instances where it may
mhm.
not have been trained on or tested on, where a human in the loop would actually still be very much advisable, because there can be instances where, that the AI systems have not been trained on, so therefore cannot perform reliably on. Is that something that can
Yeah.
be kind of proceduralized in your for your thinking as well, that can help businesses realize that yes, we can get these kind of metrics on performance, but these are the ones that we don't have on, so therefore we really don't want to replace, but we want to augment, to your point earlier.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I think one thing I would recommend, unless they're sort of really very basic and mundane tasks, always to have the human in the loop, right? So a couple of things. So you're always better off having the human in the loop. And then slowly reducing the involvement of the human if you think that the human is not adding any value, right? So now I think the baseline is very important, right? So to understand where the human is performing, at what level that the human is performing across different constraints or different parameters. Not every decision is not the same. Even if you just take the same air traffic controller thing that we were talking about, it's not that every day it's the same kind of a decision, right? So sometimes you have more aircrafts, less aircrafts, the wind speeds are different types of emergency aircraft might be there in the vicinity, all kinds of different nuances there. So you always want that human in the loop. Now what also happens is sort of well documented is when the at so this is how the trust equation goes. Initially you don't trust the system, and then let's say that the AI is doing well and you are essentially building trust in the AI. So there's a nice equilibrium point there where there is a good balance of trust between the human and the AI. And AI makes a recommendation, human accepts it sometimes and rejects it or overrides it sometimes. There is active involvement. But that may not always be the case as well. You could go beyond the threshold there, and the human might start trusting the AI for everything, for every decision. The human is saying, "Yeah, go with it." And if that decision making is completely handed over to the AI, you might say, "Oh, that's great! It's a complete transfer of." The duties from the human to the AI, right? So again, that may be fine under certain limited conditions, but if you're still having the human, then the purpose of that human is lost if there is an over reliance on the technology, or in this particular the AI. And that is something to watch out for as well. So you want just the Goldilocks kind of moment where you want the right level of trust between the two, so that each one is making recommendations that the other is taking or rejecting, but you don't want no trust or you don't want too much trust either, right? So over reliance. So there's a sort of a small cone or small band in which you want to operate, where there's a healthy interaction in the case of augmentation between the human and the AI. And then whether you really want to automate some of these things, and that's a matter, I think, again, technologically you have to prove. And it's also sometimes, this is where I think there's always a disagreement between the technology world and the business world. It's not that just because we can do some of these things technologically that we do need to do it, necessarily have to do it societally. The society may not accept. Again, taking the same aircraft analogy, most aircrafts almost under all situations are fly by wire, right? So they're all being automated and being flown. And that doesn't mean that anyone is going to enter into an aircraft without any of the pilots. So we still have the pilots there. They're doing a useful job. They'll intervene, right? So, but most times we can run the aircrafts, or the aircraft industry has figured out that you can run it fly by wire for most of the cases. And interestingly, there are some studies that have shown that in some of the near misses, it's not so much the AI or the software got it wrong. It is the human overriding the software that they've got it wrong, and that has resulted in action, right? So we can't react in a fast enough way that potentially an AI can, right? So and those things now from the aircraft world are coming into the autonomous vehicle world, right? So as more and more of our driving gets autonomous, the same kind of thing holds good, right? So again, when you're driving, to what extent you can leave the hands off the steering wheel, and what is the number of seconds before you need your hands back on the steering wheel, right? So this is sort of a small window, and can humans actually switch context and get there, right? So and if you don't, what happens, right? So there are some instances where the machine takes over because it's not enough reaction time for the human to react. In some other cases, you want the human to take action as opposed to the machine, right? So this whole interaction between when does a human take the action without the AI or overriding the AI, or when does the AI doesn't even present options to the human because there's no time for the human to react, so it takes its actions independently. Those are all interesting things which were more in the philosophical realm. Now they are becoming very much in the practical operational realm, right? So whether you're talking about autonomous vehicles, or whether you're talking about AI in financial services or healthcare, they all have sort of similar kinds of notions. I think you might be on mute,
Ah,
so
thank
I
you.
didn't.
So yes, I have come across instances where the physicians, before they have trust within the that the systems are AI system is making the right decision or giving the right output, that they want to verify, they want to validate, and I think that's certainly where I think the core strength plays between the two of what AI systems can do and what humans can do, and how it comes together. I'm still seeing a little bit of a bandwidth issue, but hopefully that'll go away. So let's talk about the one thing that you mentioned, which I've not heard anyone else talk about, and that is the AI trust in humans. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I know we spent quite a lot of time on the humans trusting the AI as we just went through. And I think if you come think of it, there's a reverse as well. So the AI these days is essentially observing many human beings, different types of human beings, many human beings on various activities. So now, just as the humans need to trust the AI also needs to know which human to trust for what decision. So this might seem counterintuitive. Why should the AI should trust all humans, right? So maybe another law of robotics, right? So always trust the human. Uh, but human for what decisions, right? So again, if you just take an organizational context, there are people with specific expertise. So you have the finance organization or the finance officer, they are experts in finance. There are people who are experts in marketing, in operations, in IT. Now, the AI, if it's interacting with all different types of people and skills, needs to know, hey, I would rather trust the chief finance officer on anything to do with the numbers and the finance, and not and give more trust to the marketing person when it comes to marketing issues, not trust the CFO, right? So that level, again, CFO is a high level, but at a people level, trying to understand what decisions that people are making and which human to trust for what purposes. And again, even if you take within a single area, let's just take an insurance company and underwriters, right? So again, the AI is observing multiple underwriters, is providing similar kind of solutions to all of them. It's seeing which underwriter is overriding its decisions, which underwriter just accepts the recommendations, and it's going to make some modifications to its algorithm based on what it's observing. So it needs to know, hey, which underwriter to trust more than the others, right? So experienced one, maybe more a subject matter expert, right? So it needs to determine that over a period of time. So it also starts making the judgment. Again, the wisdom of crowds approach is what it's going to be using to say, hey, the all these people are trustworthy, but within that maybe there are some who are more of an expert than the others, right? So, and let's not trust everyone for everything. So then you get a averaging of results. You really need to be trusting specific individuals for specific subject areas or decisions. So that's the kind of thing that the AI needs to build in terms of trusting, right? So again, some of these are taken into account as people build the reinforcement learning, but it's also about the human behavior. It's not purely the AI. It's trying to understand how the humans are behaving, and the humans could also be trying to fool the AI into believing certain things, right? So you need to really account for how people are behaving and then take that into account.
That's quite interesting and does raise its own plethora of questions and ethics, right? Around, so, for example, the self driving car that you mentioned, right? Now, if there is a way of scoring the user or the driver's interaction of how it interacts, when it is able to do something that is actually resulted in quote unquote better outcomes, right?
Mhm.
How do you automate that scoring from a automation perspective,
Yeah,
right? And right, yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
that certainly
yeah.
can be scored and automated to your point. But then, do you feel that's something that we would want to automate?
That's right. Yeah. So there's a technical aspect to it in terms of, hey, how can we go about automating it? What algorithm do we use, and so on, right? So there's a set of issues there, but then there are also ethical issues. So should we really go and do that? And so you are encroaching upon the personal information, the behavior of the people. In fact, there is an insurance company in South Africa which actually observes, the AI is observing your behavior. And if you're turning rash on a corner or you're driving too fast, it's observing the behavior and it adjusts the insurance rates accordingly. So there is a bonus given for good driving behavior, right? And if you change your behavior over a period of time and become better, not accelerating too much or taking the proper speed across the different turns and so on, your premium actually comes down, right? So again, you have to opt into it. So someone needs to say, yeah, you quote unquote insurance company can use the data from my car on how am I driving, and then based on that, give me incentives to get a better driver. But that needs to come from the individual, that I want to be a better driver and also have lower costs, and it shouldn't be enforced upon them. That, hey, we are going to monitor your behavior and maybe send a message to the to the cops to send you a ticket, right? So yes, that's possible, right? So technologically that's possible, but obviously we don't do that because there's certain societal norms, there's certain privacy issues, right? So I think the one is trying to understand what the technical nature is, but then there is also an ethical, and how do you want to adopt it as a society aspect to it.
Yeah, that does raise a point, right? Where it becomes what is the line you want to maintain between acceptable and surveillance, for example, and I think I
That's
love
right.
the fact that what you said, which is, let's say that this is a capability that is there, but it's on the user to decide, do I want to lower my rates or do I want to stay status quo, right, and not report my
Yeah,
information? So if it is in the user's
that's
hands,
right.
I think that does change the conversation a bit, right? It's not that okay, the insurance companies are playing surveillance tactics here, and they're going to do this. and you play out worst case scenarios where and or if you want, I don't know if the users will be savvy enough. And I'm sure, with things such
Yeah,
as, and I'm really brainstorm, I mean, kind of thinking aloud here. But I love that fact that, if it is in the hands,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, so there's another complication here, right? So especially in the insurance industry, they call it adverse selection. So what happens? Just take that example, and this happened in that market, in the South African market as well. So you have people who want to change their behavior and lower the rates. Essentially, go with this particular insurance company and say, "Hey, you can install whatever device on mine. Basically, look at how I am driving, and then reduce." Now, if you just look at the population, anyone who wants to behave, quote unquote, in a good driver behavior generally starts installing this device, starts getting the data, and starts lowering the premium. Now, if you look at it from a market perspective, now let's say there are three insurance companies, the other two are not having this device. So suddenly what happens is more and more of the quote unquote good drivers come to this particular insurance company, get their rates lowered. Now, what happens is that the other two insurance companies are stuck with the more rash drivers, and the incidents for them actually start increasing, which means that their premiums actually start going up, right? So, if they have to maintain it. So, even though it's an individual choice, but forcing that, you have sort of polarized the market in a way that there are good drivers who go with one insurance company, the bad drivers are going to the different insurance company, and then their rates are much higher, these rates are lower. We might say, hey, as a society, that's fine. Or we might say, no, 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 no. As a society, we shouldn't allow it, right? So driving is a basic minimum, and insurance should be similar, right? So again, two sides of the coin, right? So again, each society can choose differently, but that then becomes a societal decision, right? So that needs to be mediated. So that's why it gets interesting. Yes, you want the individual to decide, but at some level, there is also a societal thing. And again, it can be the whole society, or it can be the insurance company as well. Hey, should we do this? If we start doing offering this, then we might polarize or cannibalize our revenue earnings. This is a decision that they may have to make, right? So that might still be fine, but if it's a very niche area, then you probably cannot survive. But if it's a large enough area, you can still survive. So all kinds of dynamics happen, from the individual to the company to the society, when it comes to this type of
Wow.
trust.
Certainly learned something. Thank you. So, if I were to, as we're coming close to the end of the podcast, to just sum up, what is trust management, how it plays a really important role in whether on the soft skill side, on the soft emotional side, and the mindset, right? Of, do we accept it in our environment? Do I accept this to do and either replace my job, or hopefully will not replace my job, but to do my job better? We talked about a few things: trust management, what it is, agency and over reliance, as well as how this technology is going to raise more ethical and more trust questions that we have to be able to be agile enough to respond to, right? And really, it's going to come down to at an organization level. So, is there anything you'd like to conclude with? Um, sure.
Yeah. So just to conclude, I would say um, trust management is a process, and so make sure that whenever you're having any AI adopted, scaled, right, so deploying, make sure that you consider not just change management in terms of the people, but consider trust management, which is building the trust between the human and the AI. Uh, Very in detail, and it happens over a period of time, right? So just sort of consider that, use some of the techniques that we just talked about, so that you're consciously addressing how to build trust between the human and the AI. So that's the sort of the bottom line message, right? So because change management is sort of very well practiced these days, large transformation, but make sure that you are also practicing elements of trust management when you're installing AI. And then there is also a technology element, but then a societal element or an ethical element as well, right? So consider both, not just in deployment, but also early on when you're actually
Okay,
building the
thank
system.
you. I'll post in the show notes how they can, anybody who wants to get in touch with you can reach out to you. But this was a very interesting and very timely podcast because we are looking to not only adopt, but be successful with AI, and everybody is trying to figure out what is the best way to really see the results that we want to get, but not at the expense of humanity. So
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me as part of
thank
your show.
you.
Thank you.